Hi, second graders. We're going to take a look today at Seek the Sun. It's from Ready Gen Unit 4, Module A, Lesson 9. On Monday, Mrs. Sodden read the story Seek the Sun. So if you didn't get a chance to hear the story yet, it would be a good idea to pause this video with me and go back into Mrs. Sodden's slide on Monday and listen to her read the story first. Then you can come back and watch this video. So today in this lesson about Seek the Sun, we're going to compare and contrast the characters. So we know that the sandal maker and his wife are the main characters in this story. What do they have in common with some other supporting characters in this story? We can read this passage here from the story to try to find the answer to our question about what they have in common with the other supporting characters in the story. Next door on the left, the tatami maker's house stood in the shade of the same tall building. The tofu maker's house on the right stood in shade too. The building cast a long shadow. It kept the sun from shining on all the houses in one whole corner of Asukas. So, again, the question says, what do they have in common with some of the other supporting characters in this story? So, the sandal maker and the wife, they're the main characters. So, when we talk about the other characters, the tatami maker and the tofu maker, their houses both also stood in the shade of the tall building and kept the sun from shining on them. What details does the author use on page 7 to show that the winds were really strong? So we're going to take a look at this passage here on page 7, and you can also see the picture here of the woman, and you can notice the wind is definitely blowing the way that the author, way the illustrator drew the picture in the image. So the text says, the breezes that once blew gently in Asukas now whipped around the tall building. The breezes turned into gusts of wind that lifted the sandal maker's wife's skirt when she went outside. The wind tore up her umbrella when it rained. The wind grew so fierce it spun the dust and the dirt into swirling tornadoes, and it even uprooted the sandal maker's precious plants. So if we look back at the text, we can see there are lots of details that the author gives us to show that the winds were really strong. Said that the breeze once blew gently, but they used the word whipped around, and gusts of wind that lifted her skirt and made the umbrella, it tore the umbrella up. So you can see that if you look at the picture right here, that the umbrella is now going in the wrong direction. It's not providing any protection for the woman. You can see the dog is nervous, that the curtains over here are really blowing. The wind grew so fierce is another word that we know the word fierce means something that's really aggressive or rough. And it also tells you that it spun the dust and the dirt into swirling tornadoes. So those little details all give you a really good idea about how strong the winds were. So next we're going to look at this question. What is the sandal maker's wife's response to the tall building? What does this response show about her? How does this response compare to her husband's response? So let's read the text so we can try to answer these questions. We will find a way, said his wife. Our fortune said so. We will find a way to seek the sun, and our neighbors will help us. We will go to the courthouse and talk to the judge. Okay, so the sandal maker's wife's response to the tall building, it appears if we look at the text, we think, She's telling us that she's going to find a way to make things change, that she's thinking positively, that she is going to make a difference and have things change. And it shows that she's a very determined person, that she wants things to be in a positive way, and that she will work hard to make those changes. Now, how does this response compare to her husband's response? Think for a second from the story. Do you think that they're thinking the same, or are they thinking different? She's definitely a positive thinker. So when we think about how the sandal maker's wife response, how it's similar or different to her husband, she's thinking very positively where he was thinking negatively. He was comparing the winds to like a dragon, where she's saying, no, we will seek the sun, we'll do whatever we need to. Let's take a look at our next page. We're going to move on and talk about some of the vocabulary words from the story. So our first word here, move this over so you can see it, is the word tended. And you can see in the picture, the woman is tending her garden. And in the story, it tells us the sandal maker tended to his plants as lovingly as he always had, but his holly tree grew weak in the shade. So in the story, they're telling us the sandal maker tended to his plants. So it means he's taking very good care and doing what he needs to do to make sure that they grow properly, similar to what the picture is of the woman in her garden. And lovingly, we know that that word means that we take care of something in a very loving way, that we're very gentle and we show a lot of love. So again, in the sentence, in the story, it tells us the sandal maker tended to his plants as lovingly as he always had. So it's telling us that he took care of them with as much love as possible. And then our last vocabulary word is the word precious. And we know that precious means something that's very special or important. And in the story, I'm going to read it all the way through because the word precious in the story, in this passage that we have up, it's at the end. So, the sandal maker tended to his plants as lovingly as he always had, but his holly tree grew weak in the shade. His tiny bonsai trees stopped bearing fruit. The breezes that once blew gently in asukas now whipped around the tall building. The breezes turned into gusts of wind that lifted the sandal maker's wife's skirt when she went outside. The wind tore up her umbrella when it rained. The wind grew so fierce it spun the dust and dirt into swirling tornadoes, and it even uprooted the sandal maker's precious plants. So we know that when they're talking about the plants, they're describing them as precious. They were very special to the sandal maker. So I hope you liked answering some questions and comparing and contrasting the characters from the Seek the Sun story, and we'll continue to learn more about this story on Friday with Mrs. Mansfield. Have a great day. See you later. Bye.